So, you're here for the spoilers. You're here to understand this show. And I do recommend you maybe watch this before you go and see the show because you might understand it better. Or maybe you just are not, you just can't deny spoilers or you're never going to be able to see this. So, I'm going to tell you the plot of the musical. So it goes as follows. White Girl in Danger is a fever dream mashup of classic daytime and primetime soap operas. The citizens of the soap opera town, all white, face high-stake drama and intrigue all the day of their lives, but Keisha Gibbs and the other black grounds have been relegated to backburner stories of slavery and police violence. Keisha is determined to step out of the black ground and into the center of all white's juiciest stories. Can Keisha handle the all-white attention, especially from the all-white killer on the loose? What role do the other black grounds play in Keisha's all-white schemes? And just whose story is this anyway? So that is the main plot. Now I'm going to tell you, does Keisha handle the all-white attention? And she doesn't. She doesn't handle the attention and becomes like a white girl through her actions and her hair. And as she progresses as a character because basically one of the white side characters dies, and she's upgraded to her status. And this is very Truman Show-esque in the sense that there is a creator that is controlling what happens and what doesn't happen. It's basically like the Truman Show, but if it focuses on racism. That's a good way to describe the show. And you see her start to talk like them and become blonde. And so as the first act progresses, she tries to sabotage the other girl's story and succeeds as most of them die, but that's because the all-white killer is killing off the main characters of the soap opera, which are all white. So at the end of the first act, the black grounds become the center and the whites take the place of the black grounds. So that's a very interesting concept that I was like, oh wow, and so that's how the first act ends. So instead of equity or equality, it's the oppressed becoming the oppressor and doing the same thing whites did to them. And there's a funny scene during the intermission where video plays of a Christmas scene where Eric's character is the token white guy instead of the token black guy, as everyone else is black. He apologizes for being white and goes into the background. I find this is a smart way of addressing the culture we're in right now and how certain people act in the name of diversity. I interpret it as a warning to POC people and supporters that are white to be careful with how they implement and execute diversity. The show acts as an unrealistic, exaggerated take on what our world could be if we go in a perceived progressive way, but really it's the opposite. And in society, I see whites as afraid of saying the wrong thing due to not wanting to be seen as racist. They have to agree with all things and are stripped of their wholeness. And basically what I mean by that is that in media, online culture, discourse, I see, and even in real life, I see that if you're a white person and you don't agree that this movie is racist, or you don't agree with this black person, you are ashamed and you are made to be seen as racist. And because of that, you can't have debate, conversation, and you lose your wholeness as a person, because as people, our wholeness comes from being able to express our ideas and not have fear of retaliation. It's basically undermining and deconstructing the liberal mindset on race and showing its flaws. So that's a lot to take in. That is a lot to take in. But that is essentially what Act 1 is about, and it progresses into Act 2, and then it switches. And so you're probably thinking, wow. Like, that's a lot to take in. And really what the, point of all of this is to show that these black grounds characters, especially Keisha, go through very unethical, morally inept ways of getting to the center of attention. And the ways that they do this is not good. And they essentially make the white people the black grounds, and they strip them of their unique stories. And that's a controversial, dangerous idea, because there is this very dumb idea from conservatives and people that are against diversity that black people are going to replace them, and that Halle Berry in Little Mermaid has become a huge problem. That's an example, right? And I think that people will say, well, it's not true at the time, blah, 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 all these dumb things that are just thinly veiled things for their racism. However, there are people out there that are for diversity, but they are concerned with how it's being implemented and the way that certain people are talking about diversity that are not racist, that actually have good points, good discussions. Might be against, for example, Ariel being black, but it's not because they're racist. And I don't know what, and I don't want to speak for those people, and you can like look up what it is, but there, you can tell the difference between when someone is against diversity because of racism and when they're against it because, or they're not against it, but they are questioning it. They are whatever. And if you're not like accepting it and yes and, you know, you're not just saying, okay, yeah, you're considered a racist, which is wrong, which is very wrong. You know, I think the best way for me to visually describe is I'm going to show you this compilation of TikToks. And then that compilation of TikToks is kind of what the show is, basically. And kind of what Act 2 is, and is that'll prepare you for what you're going to be seeing in White Girl Nature. So here you go.
White, and you're hanging out with your friend group of color, you need to ask permission from everybody in the group to bring your white friend. Like, don't just bring them with them. I might not be in the mood to deal with white shenanigans that day. That's all I'm saying. And another thing, it feeds into their ego. Like, don't let them think they're a good white.
It's not racism. Me calling a white person a tub of mayonnaise and like flower looking ass, that's not racism.
You went all the way to Africa to physically take black people from their homes, shove them in on boats where a lot of them got diseases and died, told them where they could sit on a bus, told them which schools they could go to, which water fountains they could use, which bathrooms they could use, and that's sugarcoating it. Those are just terms. I'm not even describing all the disgusting things that happen, and they don't even want revenge. They are letting you guys skate by asking for equal rights. That's it? And you're still saying no? They are not as angry as they should be. Y'all are getting off easy and you're still saying no? Fuck you.
So you've seen the TikToks, and those are real TikToks, by the way. So that is essentially the over-exaggerated world that becomes all white in Act 1, at the end of Act 1, in the beginning of Act 2, and it continues throughout the end of the show. And it's those certain ideologies and takes that are dangerous, that are too radical and too to the quote-unquote left, that is essentially doing the opposite of what people that want diversity and inclusion and equity to be. Is for white people to feel guilty, is for white people to not be able to speak their truth and all of that stuff. And those takes of, you know, for example, like, someone on Twitter like once said, you know, oh, like, boo-hoo if like white people aren't getting the roles they want because, you know, we've been oppressed for 400 years, so now you can feel what it's like. And yeah, and it's a warning to those people. And there's another video that I will share with you that is, I don't really agree with, but it kind of is. If you watch the video, it'll kind of give you a good idea of what they're going for White Girl Nature, although they differ in a lot of ways, and it's not the same, but it is at the same time. It's not, but it is. And there was comments in that video that talked that, and I'll show them to you, where white people said that being bullied for having a lighter skin tone in a majority POC school, and then basically saying, why is it acceptable on TikTok that it's okay to be racist towards white people, and how if a white person were to say, hey, I was bullied and victimized and called all these racist things that you might call a white person, they would be seen as they would be seen as racist. Like, you couldn't say something like that. Stuff like, I was bullied and you know, targeted by black people and being perceived as racist. And I do think that black people can be racist. That's a hot take. But I think that's kind of what the show is kind of saying too. And then there's another comment that says, I know that in the past white people have been horrible to other races, and it still happens, but not as much. But it's like we've come full circle and history is repeating itself only towards white people. I feel bad for saying all I'm saying now, and I'm expecting people to say it's not the same. Well, you have no right to say that because you're white. And it's because of comments like those that I now feel ashamed of my skin color and I can't stick up for myself because I'll be automatically assumed as racist, or that my struggles don't matter because I'm not a person of color. I have a lot of friends who are of color, and their friends and families despise me because I'm white. I've been abandoned and left in the dark by many others because I'm white. If others want us not to hate other races, why can't they do the same? And that comment right there is like a perfect representation of what they're getting out with this show. Where essentially they white people feel ashamed, guilty, and some have even had mental health problems because they've been told that they are the reason why black people are enslaved and all this, and that they should feel guilty that they're white, right? And there's another great scene where there's two great scenes actually. One where they're at the party and all the all whites are in the background now and the blacks are in control, right? And one of the all whites is threatened to be canceled if they don't give one of the black people money, and the way they're going to cancel them is by, and this is really stupid, is by getting a photograph of their great grandmother that was a slave owner. And then she's like, oh no, I'm sorry, and she gives them the money. And they do kind of say, without saying it, like, the white people are ashamed that they're white. And that comment right there is really what the show is. It's really about, like, that, I would say, valid idea and concern, and saying this is what will happen if we continue to have this mentality about diversity, and that we are going too radical with it. And it is a deconstruction of the liberal mindset of racism and how we interact with it and how we deal with it, and looking at its fundamental flaws. And no show in history, no show in the world right now, no show in New York City is doing that. And I think that's so brave, I think that's so bold, that's so mind-blowing, and it's perfect for this time. However, I do think it's ahead of its time because I think a lot of people will come to this realization and this perspective in 20 years. So that's why I don't know if this show will be very well received by a lot of people, and it will be very divisive and a divided show. So overall, the theme of the Act 1 is that. Hopefully that makes sense and you can kind of understand what I'm saying. I don't want to, address this topic too much because it's already a long video, it's gonna be. But that is essentially, to summarize it, if you really want a summarization of it, it is really a deconstruction of the way that we are talking about diversity now, and addressing the ways that we are looking at race in America right now, and how it kind of is becoming problematic, and showing and being a warning to us of not to get too radicalized, because we will end up creating a very negative society that will do unto them what they did to us. And it's not saying diversity is bad, it's not saying that it's not good, but it is basically very gutsily saying, but there is a point where you do get too dangerously close to becoming the oppressor. And that to me is just very genius. I think that the only thing that I'm kind of concerned about is that there are people that might feel validated by this and that might get the wrong message. People that are against diversity that might feel like, oh wow, like we're validated. Because there is a scene where they have White Lives Matter signs, and you kind of feel empathy and you kind of understand why they would say that, or why, because they are kind of being discriminated against. And so I think they just gotta toe the line carefully and make it maybe a little bit more clear to people that, like, that they're not validating these conservative racists. That's my only concern with this show. But besides that, perfect. So, now we get into the end of the second act. So the all-white killer is actually Keisha's mom, and she wants Keisha to have what she never got, which is to have a leading part. And the creator comes from an alternative universe where he's just black. And this is a funny joke because in America, black people don't feel like they can be American, that they can be considered a part of the white culture. And the creator is also James Jackson Jr.'s character. The profound line is that he says in the show is, not Obama or Kamala Harris black, just blood and soil American black. This is profound because blacks don't feel like they belong or are American because they are always othered. They ask if he's alien, which is funny because, he's not alien. And they also make an Aunt Jemima joke to Nell and say, hey, isn't that your cousin? And then she's like, that Aunt Jemima, I'm gonna beat her up. And that was really funny. And so basically the reason why he created this place was he wanted to create a world where two black women could lead and not be the stereotype. That's why he allowed the killing of the girls. He says that this is a minstrel show as other forms of black shows which compete to appease the white man. What he means, and how White Girl Nature, I guess, is a minstrel show is because they do play stereotypical roles of black people, and that's the accents that I was talking about. They speak, like they would in, like, stereotypical works that feature black people. I think you know what I'm talking about. That's, I guess, the way of a minstrel show. And he also talked about how he hates and loves the audience. So he hates and loves the audience, i.e. white people. And the reason why is because it's a meta-commentary on Michael himself as he gets to the top and the acclaim by appeasing white people with his work. Strange loop. He continues the cycle of only wealthy whites seeing his work and only they can validate him so he can be legit, which I don't think anyone can debate. He hates this, but accepts it. And there was actually an interesting thing that so he did a Q&A back in the summer. So I asked him the question, by making the price of tickets for your show go up, is that not making it available to only the middle class and wealthy white people? Or is that just a systematic issue that you just had to accept because this industry is built on capitalism and middle-aged white women? And then his response was basically saying, if there is a will, there is a way. Folks who really want to see it figure out how to see it. And commercial theory is definitely a capitalist industry, middle-aged white women or not. That said, a strange loop is many things, but it is not insulin. You won't die if you don't see it right away. The longer it runs, it makes money, the more opportunities there will be to see it in the future. And I thought it was a pretty BS answer, because he kind of can't say that he agrees with me, and I wonder if he was inspired by my comment, because he does make a commentary on that. He does actually make a commentary on that he is trapped in a industry where the only way to really get successful and to have a show be successful is by getting white people into it, is by appealing to white people. And I mean, that's true. I mean, and he basically says that he in a way, Michael R. Jackson is continuing to progress this, you could say, unfair industry and the way that Broadway shows are run, which is that Broadway shows run because of white people. If white people didn't exist, Broadway shows wouldn't exist. And they are the ones that get the money, that get the nominations that you need to appease to, that, you have to market to. And in a way, black stories have to appease to them, and they like police brutality and slavery, or things that make them feel good about themselves and how liberal and progressive they are. I hope that makes sense. But that's really what it is you're trying to appeal to them, and by competing for that, you kind of create a minstrel show. And the reason why he says that is because he says that in musicals, and black women belting in roles like Caroline or Change are from violence and minstrel shows and musicals. Because basically belting and being a slave is kind of keeping black people in the position they were in years ago, and is belting and all that stuff, and yes, queen, all that is a stereotype of black women. And it is, you could say, confirming the stereotype that white people expect from a black performer, and so that is why it is in a way a minstrel show, which shook me to my core and made the audience go like, ooh, especially when they mentioned Caroline or Change. But he's not wrong. He really isn't wrong. And that's kind of getting back to the point that Michael was trying to make of these everyday things that we see as normal, which really aren't normal. And then he says parading around blacks, which is seen as celebration, is really a form of minstrel, which I do agree with, because, one example is Elle Morgan Lee, and when she got nominated, it was awesome, but everyone kind of paraded her around like some circus animal, and I'm just using her as an example because I just felt like, if I was the first brown, Harry Potter, and they paraded me around, in a way, I wonder if those people that get celebrated, which is good, might feel like black, like objects that are like, ooh, look at this, look at this, and that kind of feels a little like, ugh, you know? And I kind of think that black people just want to be treated as regular people, and they don't want it to be a big deal, because it is a way to say, look at the good job we did, and it allows the white people to get a pat on the back and a handshake and feel good. And it was also funny when he says, I'm centering myself, and is in the center of the stage, and moves to the side. He also talks about how he has sexist ideals based on how he has seen women in media. And so that is basically the creator. And then it ends with the black women singing a song about how black people can have stories that aren't just police violence and brutality. And that's a great message. So the real question is, do we have the power to discriminate? And the answer is yes. The culture we've lived in that's, you know, really accepting and woke has antagonized the cis straight white men. And oftentimes I've heard people that are straight and cis and white and men preface like, oh, I'm a straight cis white man, so I don't know this, or I'm a straight cis white man, just to preface this. And I don't like that, because I feel like it devalues them, and it kind of antagonizes them and makes their points less valid, which is, and almost makes them ashamed, which I don't really agree with. The real point of the last song is to kind of, because I think Michael O. Jackson's themes of the way black people are exploited in media and all this stuff, I think that this is very much a companion piece to A Strange Loop, and he even said that himself, is kind of letting people understand how we use black people in media, and the ways that we should and shouldn't use them, and opening our eyes to things that we think are normal but really are kind of dehumanizing, or another form of a minstrel show. And a lot of people might say, well, these two shows are successful, Strange Loop and Michael and Danger, because they are, in a way, playing on black trauma, and that is true. However, it is deconstructing that and still giving black characters and actors very intense roles and allowing them to speak their truth. And also, I think, is paving the way so that this is really radical, but we could then get to something even more radical, which is having stories where black people are just normal and they don't have any racial issues. Their issue is a prom date, which, if you were to present that to a theater owner, they might be like, well, that's really radical, because you're not going to get any nominations or awards, because that's not how black people succeed in this business. And I feel like in a lot of ways, that final song was a call to fellow writers and future generations of writers that you can tell stories that aren't trauma-based, that aren't like White Girl in Danger and Strange Loop. And I truly do believe that these two shows are paving the way for that beautiful future. So that is my review of White Girl in Danger. Very long review. It's probably gonna be at least like a 30-minute video. So make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. See this show. Know that it is a work in progress. Yeah, this one's gonna be big. Very, very divisive, but definitely go see it. Yeah, peace.